The cry in the kitchen. The night was quiet in Los Angeles, but inside one small apartment the silence was broken by the sound of a child crying. The little girl was no more than 7 years old, her hair tangled, her small hands shaking as she tried to wipe the milk that dripped from her clothes. Her stepmother stood above her, face twisted with anger, holding the empty glass that had just been poured on the child's head. "You're useless," the woman hissed, her voice sharp. "You can't even carry a glass without spilling it. Clean this mess before your father comes home." The girl bent down quickly, her tears mixing with the spilled milk on the floor. Her heart was pounding, her chest tight with shame. She had only wanted to help, only wanted to set the table for dinner. But every effort she made seemed to end in punishment. Her stepmother's words echoed inside her small heart like a heavy hammer, each one making her feel smaller, weaker, more invisible. What neither the stepmother nor the little girl realized was that someone else had seen it all. Standing quietly, at the doorway was Keanu Reeves. He had come to visit a friend in the building, but the sound of crying had drawn him in. What he saw made his chest tighten with anger. His eyes, usually soft and patient, burned with a fire that rarely showed. Keanu stepped forward, his voice calm but sharp, cutting through the cruelty in the room. "Stop," he said, his tone low but powerful. The stepmother froze, startled, her face paling as she turned toward him. "Who are you?" she demanded, but her voice trembled slightly. He ignored the question and knelt down beside the girl, gently helping her to her feet. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. His voice was like a shelter, warm and steady, and for the first time that day the girl felt seen. She nodded quickly, afraid to speak, but her wide eyes told him everything. The stepmother scoffed, crossing her arms. "This is none of your business. She needs discipline. Children must learn." Keanu rose slowly to his full height, his presence filling the small kitchen. "Discipline is not cruelty," he said evenly. "Teaching is not humiliation. You don't teach a child respect by breaking their spirit." His words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The stepmother shifted uncomfortably, muttering something under her breath, but the power in his voice silenced her. She turned away, pretending to busy herself at the counter. Keanu looked back, at the girl, who still stood frozen, her small hands clutching the hem of her milk-stained shirt. He offered her a gentle smile. "Let's clean this up together," he said. Slowly, carefully, he knelt down and began wiping the floor with a cloth. The girl blinked in surprise. No adult had ever done that for her before. With trembling hands, she joined him, and for a moment the weight in her chest lifted. When the floor was clean, Keanu rinsed the cloth and handed it back to her. "You did well," he said warmly. The girl's lips trembled, and then, as if the words had unlocked something deep inside her, she whispered, "Thank you." His heart broke at how small her voice was, how much fear hid behind it. He crouched down again, looking her gently in the eyes. "Never forget this," he said quietly. "You are not useless. You are not weak. You are stronger than you know, and one day you'll see that." Her eyes filled with tears, but for the first time they were not only tears of pain, they were mixed with hope. The stepmother slammed a cabinet door, muttering about strangers interfering. But Keanu didn't move. His eyes stayed on the girl, his voice steady. "If anyone tells you that you are less, remember my words. You are enough." The moment passed, but something inside both of them had shifted. The girl felt, perhaps for the first time in her young life, that she mattered. And Keanu, as he walked out of that kitchen, knew he could not just leave this behind. The image of milk dripping from her small hands, her silent tears, would not leave him. This was not just a passing moment. It was the beginning of something deeper, a story that would test courage, compassion, and the strength to stand up against cruelty. The quiet promise. The next day, the little girl carried the memory of that moment like a secret treasure. She had not told her father what had happened, not because she did not want to, but because she feared the storm it might bring. Her father worked long hours, his shoulders bent with the weight of bills and responsibilities. He rarely noticed, the small details of what happened inside the home. She did not want to add more to his burden, so she kept quiet. But in her heart, the words of the man in the old jacket echoed again and again. You are not useless. You are enough. Keanu, on the other hand, could not shake the image from his mind. He went through his day as he always did. Meetings, scripts, conversations with people who smiled but rarely listened. Yet beneath it all, the sound of that child's quiet thank you pulled at him. He had seen pain in many forms on sets, on the streets, even in his own past. But something about the rawness of that moment struck deeper. Maybe it was because he had once known what it felt like to be small and voiceless. Maybe it was because he saw in her eyes the same loneliness he had carried for years. That evening he returned to the building. He told himself he was only passing by, that it was just coincidence. But when he heard the faint sound of raised voices again, his chest tightened. He walked down the hallway, pausing near the door. Inside, the stepmother's tone was sharp, slicing through the fragile walls. You never do anything right, she barked. Your father may think you're sweet, but I know the truth. You're a burden. The little girl's small voice stammered, I'm sorry. I'll try harder. Keanu's hand clenched into a fist at his side. He wanted to burst in, to shout, to end it. But he also knew that sometimes storms could not be stopped in one blow. Sometimes change came in small steps, steady and quiet. When the stepmother left the apartment later, carrying a purse and slamming the door behind her, Keanu approached. He knocked softly. The girl opened the door, her eyes wide with surprise. You came back, she whispered. He smiled gently. I wanted to check if you were okay. She hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. The apartment was small, tidy but heavy with silence. She clutched a worn teddy bear in one hand, as if holding on to the last piece of comfort she had. Keanu sat down at the kitchen table, his voice calm. Can I tell you something? Sometimes people say cruel things because they are hurting inside, but their words don't define you. What matters is what you choose to believe. The girl climbed onto the chair across from him, her legs swinging, nervously. But what if she's right? What if I really am a burden? Her eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. Keanu leaned forward, his gaze steady and kind. Look at me, he said softly. She lifted her eyes. You are not a burden. You are a gift, and the world will one day see that. But until then, I want you to hold on to this truth. Your worth is not measured by her words, it's measured by your heart. For the first time, the girl let out a shaky breath and whispered, Thank you. No one tells me that. He smiled faintly. Then I'll remind you until you believe it. Just then, the front door opened. Her father stepped in, looking exhausted, his hands stained with the day's work. He froze when he saw Keanu sitting at the table. Who are you? He asked sharply. The girl tensed, afraid, but Keanu stood slowly, his voice respectful. My name is Keanu. I'm a neighbor just passing by. I noticed your daughter was alone, and I wanted to make sure she was safe. The father's face softened slightly, though suspicion still lingered in his eyes. She's fine, he muttered. Thank you for your concern. Keanu nodded, sensing the boundaries. He turned to the girl, giving her a small, reassuring smile. Remember what I said? She nodded quickly, clutching her teddy bear tighter. As he walked out into the cool evening, Keanu felt a weight settle in his chest. This was no longer a passing moment. He could not simply step aside and forget. The little girl's life was tangled in shadows, and though he was an outsider, he knew he had to be a light when she needed it most. And as the stars appeared above the city, Keanu made a quiet promise to himself. He would not walk away, not from her, not from this. The shadow of cruelty days passed, but the memory of Keanu's gentle words stayed with the little girl like a soft light in a dark room. Whenever her stepmother raised her voice, whenever she felt herself shrinking under cruel words, she repeated silently, You are not useless. You are enough. Those words became her shield, though the shield was still fragile. But the stepmother noticed the change. She saw that the girl no longer cried as easily. that she sometimes smiled faintly even after harsh scolding. This angered her more. Cruelty, often fed on weakness and strength, even small strength, made her feel threatened. So her punishments grew sharper, her tone colder. One evening, the stepmother forced the girl to scrub the floor long after bedtime. The little girl's arms ached, her knees raw against the hard tiles, but she did not complain. The stepmother stood with arms crossed, sneering. "Don't look at me with those eyes. You think you're strong now, don't you? Don't forget, I can break you whenever I want." The little girl lowered her head, fighting back tears. Outside the door, footsteps approached. The stepmother, startled, glanced toward the sound. The door opened, and there stood Keanu. He had returned again, carrying a bag of groceries he had meant to drop off for them, an excuse to make sure the girl was all right. But what he saw froze him. The child kneeling on the floor, exhausted, the woman towering above her. His voice, usually calm, carried steel this time. "Enough." The stepmother stiffened. "You again. You have no right to interfere." Keanu set the bag down and stepped inside, his presence filling the room. "I have every right to speak when a child is being treated this way. Respect is not optional. Kindness is not a gift, it's a duty." The woman scoffed, but his eyes held such quiet fire that for a moment she faltered. The girl looked up at him, relief and hope rushing into her small heart. He walked over, kneeling beside her. "You've done enough," he said softly. "Come on." He helped her stand, his hand steady under hers. Then he turned back to the stepmother. "Children need love to grow, not fear. You can choose to build her up, or you can keep tearing her down. But if you choose cruelty, understand this. She will remember the pain long after you're gone." The stepmother's face twisted. "You don't understand. She's not mine. She drains everything from me. Time, energy, money. Why should I care?" The words cut through the room like a blade. The little girl froze, her heart clenching as though the air had been pulled away. Keanu rose slowly, his voice low but sharp. "She may not be yours by blood, but she is a child, a human being. And no excuse gives you the right to treat her as less." The woman's anger flared, but Keanu didn't shout, didn't threaten. He simply turned his attention back to the girl kneeling once more so their eyes met. "Hear me," he said gently. "Her words are not the truth. They don't define you. What defines you is your heart, your courage, your kindness. Never forget that." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, clutching his words like lifelines. Later that night, when the father came home, the stepmother quickly painted herself as the victim, complaining about outsiders interfering. But Keanu had already decided. He could not step back anymore. He stayed outside the apartment, leaning against the wall, waiting for the father to notice the cracks in his own home. His heart was heavy, but his resolve was stronger. This was no longer just a moment of kindness. It was becoming a fight for a child's dignity. As the night stretched on, Keanu whispered quietly to himself, "I won't let her break." Cracks in the silence. The father had always lived in a blur of long hours and endless bills. Every night he returned home tired, his body aching from work, his mind too heavy to notice much beyond the surface. But lately, he began to sense something. His daughter's eyes seemed different, sometimes too quiet, sometimes too guarded, as if she carried secrets behind her small smile. That evening, when he came home and found her curled in bed far earlier than usual, clutching her teddy bear tightly, something inside him stirred. He sat on the edge of her bed, brushing her hair back gently. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" he asked softly. The girl nodded quickly, too quickly, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm fine, Papa." But he wasn't convinced. In the living room, the stepmother sat scrolling through her phone, her face set in irritation. When he asked how the girl was doing, she replied sharply, "She's dramatic, always making mistakes. I'm the one who has to keep things in order." The father sighed, rubbing his temples, but before he could question further, there was a knock at the door. When he opened it, Keanu stood there. Dressed simply, carrying no trace of his fame, his eyes were steady. The father frowned in confusion. "You again?" he muttered. Keanu nodded. "Yes, I came because I care. I can't ignore what I've seen." The father stiffened. "What exactly have you seen?" Keanu hesitated for a moment, then spoke carefully but firmly. "I've seen your daughter being treated in ways no child should endure. Words that wound deeper than any hand. Burdens placed on her that she should never carry. I've seen her spirit being chipped away piece by piece." The father's face darkened, his eyes narrowing as he glanced at his wife. "Is this true?" he demanded. The stepmother scoffed, rising quickly. "Oh, please. He's exaggerating. He doesn't understand how hard it is. Your daughter needs discipline, not coddling. She's weak. She'll never survive if we treat her like she's special." Those words lit a fire in Keanu's chest. His voice, though calm, rang with quiet power. "She is special. Every child is. And if you can't see that, then maybe you don't deserve the place you've been given in her life." The father's heart pounded. Doubt clawed at him. He remembered small things. The way his daughter sometimes avoided her stepmother's gaze. The way she smiled less these days. The faint tremble in her hands when she spilled water last week. Signs he had brushed aside. Signs that now rose like sharp stones in his chest. He turned to his wife, his voice heavy. "Tell me the truth. Have you been cruel to her?" Her face twisted. "Don't put this on me. I never asked to raise a child that wasn't mine. I give her food, a roof, clothes. What more do you want from me?" Silence filled the room. The father's shoulders slumped as the truth settled on him. For years, he had been too tired, too blind, to notice what was happening under his own roof. Guilt washed over him like a wave. Keanu stepped closer, his eyes steady but gentle. "You still have a choice," he said quietly. "To protect her. To give her the love she deserves. She is waiting for you to see her. Don't wait until it's too late." The father's throat tightened. He thought of his daughter's soft voice, her too quick assurances that she was fine, her silent tears. He thought of her mother, gone too soon, and the promise he had made at her grave to always protect their child. He had failed that promise, but maybe, with courage, he could keep it now. The stepmother snapped, her voice sharp. "If you're going to side with them, then maybe you don't need me here." She grabbed her purse, slamming the door behind her as she stormed out. The room went silent again. The father sank onto the couch, his face buried in his hands. Keanu stood quietly nearby, giving him space, but his presence was steady. After a long moment, the father looked up, his voice breaking. "Thank you for opening my eyes. I should have seen it. I should have protected her." Keanu shook his head, gently. "Don't drown in guilt. What matters is what you do now." That night, the father went into his daughter's room, sitting beside her once more. When she stirred, he took her small hand in his. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry for not seeing. But I promise you this. I will never let anyone break you again." The little girl blinked, her eyes wide with surprise, then filled with tears. She wrapped her arms around him, clinging tightly. For the first time in years, she felt truly safe. And from the doorway, Keanu watched quietly, a soft light in his eyes. This was the moment he had hoped for, the moment when silence cracked and truth began to heal. The return of anger. For a few days, peace seemed to settle over the small apartment. The father spent more time with his daughter, listening to her stories, helping with her homework, even cooking simple dinners together. The girl began to laugh again, a sound so pure and light that it filled the rooms with warmth they had not felt in years. Keanu visited often, never intruding, always carrying quiet kindness, bringing groceries, helping with small repairs, or simply sitting with them in silence that felt like comfort. But peace, fragile as it was, could not hold forever. The stepmother returned one evening, her face pale with anger, her eyes cold. She had been staying at a friend's house, but bitterness burned inside her. She had lost her power in that home, and her pride refused to let it go. When she walked through the door, her words were sharp. "So this is how it is now. You let an outsider control your house. You let a child decide who matters." The father stood tall, his voice steady but firm. "No one controls this house but me, and I will not allow cruelty here anymore." Her laugh was bitter. "Cruelty? You call discipline cruelty? You think love will protect her from the real world? You're both fools." The girl clung to her father's hand, her small body trembling. Keanu, who had been in the kitchen fixing a broken drawer, stepped into the room. His presence was calm, but his eyes burned with quiet fire. "You don't understand love," he said evenly. "And if you cannot offer it, then you have no place here." The stepmother's face twisted with fury. "You think you can take everything from me, but you can't erase me from her life. She'll always remember what I said, what I did." Keanu stepped closer, his voice steady, his words like a shield. "She will remember, but she will also learn that those words were lies, and the truth will be stronger." The father finally spoke, his tone heavy with finality. "Leave. If you cannot stay without kindness, then you cannot stay at all." The stepmother's eyes flashed with rage, but she saw the strength in his stance and the unwavering fire in Keanu's gaze. With a final slam of the door, she was gone. The girl collapsed into her father's arms, sobbing with relief and fear. "Is she really gone?" she whispered. He stroked her hair gently. "Yes, she's gone, and she will not hurt you again." But the battle was not over. Later that week, the stepmother returned once more, not to the apartment but to the schoolyard. She found the girl walking home alone and cornered her, her voice dripping with venom. "Don't think you're free of me. I'll always be in your head. You'll always hear my voice telling you the truth. You are nothing." The girl froze, fear flooding back. But just then, a shadow fell across them. Keanu had been waiting nearby, keeping watch. His voice, deep and calm, cut through the venom like a blade. "That's enough." The stepmother turned, startled. "You, again?" Keanu stepped between them, shielding the girl behind him. His tone carried quiet power. "You've already lost your place in her home. Don't lose your place in your own soul. Walk away before you destroy what's left of yourself." For a long moment the woman glared at him, but something in his eyes, steady, unshaken, filled with strength, made her falter. Muttering under her breath, she turned and stormed away, her footsteps fading. The girl clutched Keanu's hand tightly, her small voice trembling. She said, "I'll always hear her voice. What if she's right?" Keanu crouched down, meeting her eyes gently. "Then let my voice be louder. Every time you hear hers, remember mine. Remember me saying you are enough. You are loved. You are stronger than you know." Her tears spilled, but she nodded, holding on to his words like a lifeline. That night, when the father heard what happened, his heart nearly broke. He held his daughter close, vowing never to let her walk alone again. And in that moment, Keanu knew his role had become more than a bystander. He had become a guardian, a voice of truth against cruelty, and a steady light in the girl's fragile world. The voice that stayed, the days after the confrontation, brought a quiet shift into the small home. The father, now fully awake to the truth, poured himself into his daughter's life. He began walking her to school, helping her with homework, listening to her stories even when he was tired. Every small act became a piece of healing, building back the trust she had lost. But even with her gone, the stepmother's shadow sometimes lingered. Late at night, the little girl would wake in fear, hearing echoes of those cruel words, useless burden, nothing. In those moments, she would clutch her teddy bear and whisper to herself the words Keanu had given her. "You are enough. You are loved. You are stronger than you know." And slowly, the cruel voice began to fade. Keanu continued to visit, not as a savior, but as a steady friend. He helped fix broken shelves, taught Daniel how to ride a bike, and told stories that made the girl laugh until her stomach hurt. But most importantly, he was present, He showed her that kindness wasn't just a word, it was a choice, made over and over again. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft gold, the girl sat beside Keanu on the balcony. Her father was inside cooking dinner, the scent of warm food drifting through the air. The girl looked up at Keanu, her eyes brighter now, her voice steadier. "Do you think I'll ever forget what she said to me?" Keanu was quiet for a moment, then shook his head gently. "No, you won't forget. But you don't need to. Because now you'll remember something stronger too. You'll remember that you are loved. That you are enough. That you have a father who protects you and people who care about you." Her words will be just an echo, but your truth will stay. The girl leaned against him, her small voice whispering, "I believe you." And for the first time, she truly meant it. Weeks later, the father sat across from Keanu, his eyes heavy with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. "You opened my eyes when I was blind. You gave my daughter back her smile." Keanu shook his head, his tone soft. "You did that yourself. I only reminded you of what you already had, inside." The father nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "Then promise me one thing. Don't disappear from her life. She needs voices like yours. We both do." Keanu smiled faintly, his eyes warm. "I promise." And so the story found its quiet resolution. The stepmother faded into the distance, her shadow no longer ruling their days. The father rebuilt his bond with his daughter, brick by brick, with love and patience. And the little girl grew stronger, her heart no longer defined by cruelty but shaped by resilience, kindness, and the voices that chose to lift her up instead of break her down. For Keanu, it was never about being a hero. It was about being human, about seeing pain and choosing not to walk away, about speaking truth when silence would have been easier, about proving that kindness can change a life, even if only one. And for the little girl, the memory of milk spilled on the kitchen floor no longer brought shame. Instead, it became the beginning of the moment she learned her worth. The night a stranger spoke words that saved her spirit.